Well, good morning, everyone. It's been over a month since the news first broke about Justin Trudeau's $900 million scandal. Every day, new details emerge that paint a concerning picture of corruption at the highest levels of government. The close ties between Justin Trudeau, the Liberal Party, and the We organization goes back years. We know that after Justin Trudeau became Prime Minister, We started paying members of his family. Over the last 5 years, those payments have totaled more than $500,000. We know that Justin Trudeau's government has rewarded the We organization with multiple sole source contracts over the past 5 years, well before they ever dreamt up the Canada Student Service Grant. In fact, Justin Trudeau, since becoming Prime Minister, has increased government funding to We by a factor of 10, a tenfold increase. Nous savons que We Charity emploie une membre de la famille du ministre des Finances et que la famille Morneau a passé 2 vacances de luxe payées par We Charity pour une valeur de plus de $40,000. Nous savons que We Charity avait des difficultés financières et a envoyé 2 propositions à des ministres libéraux pour recevoir de l'argent. Et nous savons que Justin Trudeau et Bill Morneau ont donné à leurs amis de We Charity un contrat de près d'1 milliard de dollars pour soi-disant aider les jeunes pendant la pandémie. We also know that this wasn't the only pandemic program that was designed to benefit Liberal insiders. Just last week, we learned that the Liberals handed the multi-million-dollar rental assistance program to a Crown corporation that had no ability to deliver it, allowing the program to then be subcontracted to a company with close ties to the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff. So Conservatives are calling for the Finance Committee to investigate who made this decision to outsource the program. And we have written to the Lobbying Commissioner, since neither MCAP, the organization that ultimately got the subcontract for the rental assistance program, nor Ms. Telford's husband, a senior vice president at MCAP, are registered to lobby the government. This raises serious questions about all of the government's pandemic spending. We know that billions of dollars of taxpayers' money were handed out in a very short time frame. So how many other Liberal insiders got sweetheart deals? Ces révélations soulèvent de graves questions sur toutes les dépenses du gouvernement pendant la pandémie. Nous savons que des milliards de dollars des contribuables ont été accordés en très peu de temps. Alors, combien d'amis des libéraux en ont profité? Il est clair que le programme de bourse canadienne pour le bénévolat étudiant n'a jamais été pour les étudiants. Il servait à aider les amis du Premier ministre. We Charity ne pouvait même pas exécuter le programme au Québec et avait confié toute la partie francophone à une agence de relations publiques étroitement liée au libéral. As a result, the Ethics Commissioner is investigating. Multiple parliamentary committees are investigating, and Conservatives have written to the RCMP requesting a criminal investigation. The rental assistance program is so flawed that only a handful of businesses have been able to access it. Meanwhile, thousands of Canadian businesses who desperately need help have been left to fend for themselves. So who gets held accountable for Justin Trudeau's failures and never-ending scandals? We know that the Prime Minister isn't going to take responsibility. He never does. No member of Cabinet or the Prime Minister's inner circle has been fired. In fact, the Liberals seem to be desperately trying to pretend that there's nothing to see here. But no one is buying Justin Trudeau's latest excuses. Cette semaine, les conservateurs vont pouvoir interroger 3 autres ministres en comité, commence avec le comité de l'éthique aujourd'hui. Nous voulons la vérité. Et nous attendons toujours les milliers de pages de documents gouvernementaux du comité des finances. Pendant que Justin Trudeau continue à laisser tomber les Canadiens, nous continuons à poser les questions importantes et à nous battre pour avoir les réponses que les Canadiens méritent. Thank you very much. Happy to take your questions.
We'll now start the question period. As usual, one question, one follow-up. Comme d'habitude, une question et une question de suivi. We'll start with the question on the phone and then turn to the room. Opératrice, première question au téléphone.
Thank you. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. S'il vous plaît, appuyez sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. The first question is from Michel Lamarche de TVA. The first question is from Michel. La première question de Michel Lamarche de TVA. Please go ahead. La parole est à vous.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour, Monsieur Scheer. J'aimerais vous entendre sur ces sources au bureau du Premier ministre qui indiquent qu'on va peut-être montrer la porte à Bill Morneau pour lui préférer quelqu'un de la trempe de Mark Carney. Je veux savoir, qu'est-ce que vous pensez de tout ça? Croyez-vous que les libéraux peuvent refaire leur image en procédant à un geste comme celui-là? Est-ce que c'est sérieux?
Je crois que les libéraux vont inventer une excuse basée sur les politiques du gouvernement. Mais c'est clair que la vraie raison, c'est la performance de M. Morneau. Et il n'y a aucun impact si c'est M. Morneau, si c'est M. Carney. Quand on a une première ministre sans éthique qui implémente les programmes pour assurer que le gouvernement va avoir plus des interventions dans l'économie, qu'on augmente les impôts, qu'on emprunte les milliards de dollars et rendre la vie moins abordable pour les Canadiens. La personne qui occupe cette poste va pas avoir un grand impact. So it's clear that the Liberals are going to try to invent some kind of a policy excuse if they do make a change. Justin Trudeau is going to try to invent some kind of a conflict. We all know, though, that it's not only Mr. Morneau's scandalous ethics problems, but also the Prime Minister's himself. And it really doesn't matter making a trade for Bill Morneau when you've got a Prime Minister that has such a lack of ethics, embroiled in so many scandals, and just focused on growing the government at the expense of the free market, growing the size of government, increasing the way that government interferes and intervenes in the economy and in people's daily lives, a tax and borrow and spend policy. It really doesn't matter it really doesn't matter who's sitting in the chair if those are the policies that are being implemented. It doesn't matter how much credibility you might have in your previous life, how many letters you have under your name. If you are going to be part of Justin Trudeau's government, expanding the state and making life less affordable, leaving less money in the pockets of Canadians, that is always a recipe for disaster. Bigger governments, higher taxes, bigger deficits have never created more prosperity. Low taxes, free people making free choices, buying and selling goods and services freely, that is what creates prosperity. And so whether they trade Bill Morneau for somebody else, it really doesn't matter as long as Justin Trudeau's Prime Minister.
Un suivi, Michel? Est-ce qu'on a un suivi pour Michel Lamarche? OK. Opératrice, prochaine question au téléphone?
Oui. La prochaine question est de Antoine Trépanier de Radio-Canada. The next question is from Antoine Trépanier of Radio-Canada. Please go ahead. La parole est à vous.
Oui, bonjour, M. Scheer. Je voudrais savoir, c'est quoi vos attentes par rapport au comité cet après-midi sur l'éthique? Qu'est-ce que vous allez essayer de savoir davantage que vous ne savez pas déjà par rapport à oui?
Alors, nous voulons la vérité. Nous voulons déterminer qui a contacté cette organisation, qui dans le bureau du Premier ministre a eu les détails, a partagé les détails, pourquoi les décisions ont été prises. Alors, nous avons vu dans les dernières semaines, on peut utiliser les comités pour arriver pour obtenir quelques aspects de la vérité. On a vu ça avec le témoignage du Premier ministre. Il a dit qu'elle a essayé d'assurer que les officiels de la service public a fait une revue sur le 8 de mai. Mais, oui, Charity a été donné la permission de dépenser l'argent le 5 mai. Alors, on a une contradiction. il y a beaucoup de contradictions dans l'histoire du Premier ministre. Alors, on va utiliser le comité aujourd'hui et dans les prochains jours pour obtenir la vérité, les vrais faits.
Et quel témoin pour vous est le témoin clé cet après-midi et qu'est-ce que vous allez tenter de lui soutirer comme information en particulier?
Alors, chaque ministre, on a des attentes pour chaque aspect de ce scandale et on va voir si un ministre ne peut pas répondre aux les questions simples, oui ou non. On va conclure, on doit arriver à la conclusion que la réponse est oui. S'il ne peut pas dire non. Et s'il ne peut pas dire oui, on peut arriver à la conclusion que la réponse doit être non. Alors, on va voir. Et comme j'ai dit, nous avons vu dans les dernières sessions des comités que le comité pour souligner les contradictions entre les témoignages des ministres et le Premier ministre. Nous sommes dans une époque sans précédent, avec la pandémie, avec les impacts économiques et avec la façon que Justin Trudeau gère le gouvernement, les scandales. Et c'est clair aujourd'hui pourquoi Justin Trudeau a essayé d'éliminer le rôle de l'opposition au mois d'avril quand la Chambre de communes a retourné. Son premier projet de loi dans la pandémie, il a essayé d'éliminer le rôle des autres partis dans le Parlement. Maintenant, on sait leur raison. Parce que les libéraux, c'est dans leur nature. Ils aiment d'utiliser le pouvoir pour récompenser ses amis et punir leurs ennemis. So today we're looking forward to the testimony from several ministers and officials. And as we've seen in the past, we're able to highlight contradictions in their stories. We're able to obtain some of the truth, but we can still point out where there are massive holes in their story, as we saw with Justin Trudeau, who said that he pushed back on his officials on May 8th, told them to do a review to make sure, but we organizations were already told that they could start spending money on May 5th. So that's a massive hole in his story. And we're in an unprecedented situation, not only with the pandemic and the economic consequences of the pandemic, but also in Justin Trudeau's handling of the government. And now we know why. Remember, his very first bill, the very first law that he introduced into Parliament during the pandemic, attempted to completely sideline the role of the opposition parties. He attempted to write himself massive powers without any supervision, without any oversight and accountability. Now we know why. Because he was trying not to get caught. He knew what he was going to be using the pandemic for, and he was trying to take steps to make sure that he wouldn't be subject to this kind of scrutiny and accountability. But Conservatives were able to fight back. Were able to prevent much of what he was trying to do. And thank goodness we did, because now we have the facts around this sordid affair. So we're going to continue to use the committee meetings in the next few days and weeks to try to obtain more of the truth so that Canadians can see the type of government Justin Trudeau is leading.
We'll now take questions in the room. Nous allons maintenant prendre des questions dans la salle.
Bonjour, Lina Dib, la presse canadienne. Je voulais juste éclaircir un point. Tout à l'heure, quand vous disiez que ce soit Bill Morneau ou un autre, il n'y aura pas de différence. Est-ce que ça veut dire que vous ne réclamez pas la démission du ministre des Finances, étant donné ce qu'il a fait et ses liens avec vous?
Non, ça c'est une bonne question pour clarifier. Non, on veut que M. Morneau va démissionner, mais c'est clair qu'il ne va pas. Parce que Justin Trudeau ne peut pas avoir des standards pour les autres ministres qu'il ne peut pas atteindre lui-même. Mais mon point, c'est qu'on a vu ça avec M. Morneau, qui a écrit des choses dans sa vie professionnelle dans le secteur privé. Quand elle a pris son place autour de la cabinet, elle a changé ses positions, elle a implémenté une politique d'augmentation des impôts, des déficits sans fin. Alors, c'est clair que ça, c'est la politique de Justin Trudeau. Alors, on ne va pas avoir un grand impact sur l'économie entre Bill Morneau et quelqu'un d'autre quand Justin Trudeau est le premier ministre.
Sur un autre sujet, j'ai dit dans la presse ce matin que dans les 4 derniers mois, votre parti a utilisé la subvention salariale pour payer ses employés à hauteur de 700 000 $. Je sais que la personne qui vous remplacera a promis elle allait se retirer de ça, mais en attendant, vous êtes le chef du Parti conservateur. Est-ce que cet argent-là, vous allez le remettre dans les coffres de l'État?
Alors, comme vous avez dit, ça sera une décision pour le prochain chef. Je crois que tous les chefs ont prononcé sur cet enjeu. Alors, j'invite vous de poser cette question à des candidats.
Next question, CBC.
Hi, Mr. Scheer, David Thurman from CBC News. Is this going to be your last press conference? I wonder if you could tell us that. And also, if you could just maybe tell Canadians, like, a lot of letters have been issued. There's been a lot of committees. There's been a lot of process, which is important. But what are, like, maybe 3 things you could point to that the opposition has achieved, or maybe that we've learned, or the smoking gun in these scandals that you say that we've seen over the last couple of summer? But if you could start by first answering if this is going to be your last press conference.
I don't have another one planned, so we'll see if there's another bombshell coming out of this government, as we saw with Bill Morneau's $40,000 of so-called forgotten expenses. Then maybe I'll see you next week if something like that comes out. As for smoking guns, though, there are so many smoking guns in the SWE scandal. I mean, you could smoke a brisket in the Liberal cabinet room right now. When you look at the contradiction in the Prime Minister's story, when you look at the way we brags about how they increase the image, they improve the image of their corporate sponsors, and then getting a sole source contract from this Liberal government and then providing Justin Trudeau a massive platform. We have serious questions about what happens with the data that we collect. There have been allegations about where that data has gone and whether or not it's gone to the Liberal Party of Canada. We want answers on that. We want to be able to verify that. When you look at what this opposition has been able to achieve, very proud of the work that we did. I've been proud of the work we've done as opposition my entire tenure, but especially since the pandemic. We were successful in preventing Justin Trudeau from eliminating the role of Parliament during a pandemic. We made the case that there should be increased accountability and increased oversight to get better programs and services to Canadians. And we were able to force Justin Trudeau to pull back partially from his initial attempt to sideline the role of the opposition parties. Because of our hard work, we saw the wage subsidy increase from 10% to 75%. We're also able to get the government to make major amendments to their programs, everything from the small business loans to other aspects of the pandemic response. So we haven't missed a beat. We've been right there. The Liberals invited us to be part of a Team Canada approach. We showed up with ideas and with concrete proposals. We were disappointed that they didn't take as many of them as we thought they should have. If they truly believed in a Team Canada approach, they would have done more of that. But as I said, I think I'm very proud of the record that we've had over the last few months, and in fact over the last few years as well.
Okay. Finally, do you have confidence in the Governor General? You've seen the stories that CBC News broke on Madame Payette. So, yeah, do you have confidence in the Governor General?
There have been serious allegations made, and I believe it's important that every Canadian in the private sector or the public sector, no matter who they work for, are able to work in a safe and harassment-free environment. As I said the last time I was asked this question, I hope that if there is a review or an investigation, that it's not just confined to that office. There are reports that have come out of the Prime Minister's office under Justin Trudeau's leadership about bullying former cabinet ministers, Jody Wilson-Raybould, trying to pressure her into making a decision that she felt was improper. We know what happened to Miss Cesar Chavin. We know the allegations around public servants who were disciplined for expressing their opinion about how Justin Trudeau handled the blackface controversy, scandal. So, there are clearly examples in the government that we would hope are also included in this review.
Good morning, Mr. Scheer. Kevin Gallagher, CTV National News. There are reports today that Bill Morneau's job could be in jeopardy. Maybe he's going to get shuffled out. What do you think? What do you think about? What do you make of these reports? Do you think that Canadians should have confidence in the finance minister and in this government?
Well, first of all, whether or not he gets shuffled out or resigns, or Justin Trudeau had an opportunity to show that he doesn't put up with scandalous behavior weeks ago. He didn't do anything then, and of course he couldn't, because he can't hold Bill Morneau to a standard that he himself cannot attain. He can't fire Bill Morneau for the exact same types of things that he himself has done. So clearly his tolerance for scandal and corruption is very high. And again, I challenge Liberal members of Parliament to do something about that. They can control who leads their party. I think Bill Morneau's had an abysmal record as Minister of Finance. When you look at the weakened position he left our economy when the pandemic hit because of his massive deficits, when you look at how Canada was falling behind other G7 countries as their economies were improving, Canada was not keeping pace with that. When you look at the tax hikes on small business and making life less affordable for Canadians. So my point is that it doesn't really matter who's Minister of Finance as long as Justin Trudeau is Prime Minister. Bill Morneau, in his private career, wrote things talking about the benefits of lower taxes, benefits of free market economics. When he became finance minister, he forgot all about that and started to implement a high tax, big government agenda. So it really doesn't matter how many initials, how many letters you have under your name, what you might have done in a previous career. It's clear that as long as Justin Trudeau is Prime Minister, we'll see tax and spend policies, an ever-expanding state, more and more intervention in the economy, less and less individual freedom, and Canadians will pay the price for that.
In terms of ethics and the Conflict of Interest Act in general, there's a lot of discussion right now going on within the Ethics Committee of a need for changes, so closing of so-called loopholes, perhaps increasing penalties. Through this whole ordeal, you've been pretty clear about your feelings about the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, but I don't understand your views on what if there needs to be changes in the actual Conflict of Interest Act or the penalties or how that's governed. Do you have any viewpoints on that right now?
Mm-hmm. Well, clearly, when Liberals are in government, there are conversations about greater penalties for ethics violations, and that's obviously a symptom of having a Prime Minister like Justin Trudeau. We've talked about the idea of strengthening some of the penalties. It used to be in this country that just being under investigation was enough for a cabinet minister to step aside for the good of the country. And after the investigation was over, if that minister was cleared, they would return to cabinet, and of course, if they were found to have violated, they would stay out of cabinet. That used to be the standard. At the very least, being found guilty of ethics violations should result in some kind of action. Clearly, the current regime is not enough to deter Liberals. So I think it is an appropriate conversation to have about how that regime can be strengthened to act as an even greater deterrence, because clearly they have no shame and they're not bothered by the embarrassment of being found in violation of those rules.
Last question, Global News.
Mike Lukather from Global News. Mr. Scheer, I just wanted to ask you what you see, if any, a difference between what Ms. Telford did and what Mr. Morneau and Prime Minister Trudeau did, because according to the Prime Minister's office, Ms. Telford set up a voluntary ethics screen, recused herself. Do you see any difference in how she acted versus the other two? And could you grade them on a scale?
Well, I would give Mr. Trudeau an F for his lack of ethics. I mean, clearly, there's so many holes in his story, and this idea that he had some concerns, enough concerns to ask his officials to do a review, but not enough to formally refer the case to the ethics commissioner or to recuse himself. I'm not buying it. I think there are more details that we need to come out on the rental assistance program. Clearly, the optics are abysmal, and I'd like to have more information about exactly how that screen operated and at what level she was involved in decisions. For example, just even handing this over to CMHC seems to not have made any sense. They were not able to deliver the program. So why was that decision made? Was Ms. Telford involved in that decision? What did she know about CMHC's capacity to do that? Did she know that CMHC would have to subcontract this out? Those are the types of questions that we're hoping we had answers to. But I think we're just starting to dig into this one. So we'll wait and see what some of the testimony brings about.
I think yourself and other Conservatives have been very clear where you think this violates ethics rules. You mentioned that you've also written to the RCMP. I wanted to know why you think this reaches a criminal level and what exactly about this really should be prosecuted.
Well, there are aspects of the criminal code that talk about breach of trust and abuse of power. I can refer you to the sections that we believe may apply here. What we believe happened was that the Liberals bought the corporate sponsorship package that we offers private companies. They brag about improving the image of companies like Microsoft and Allstate and Walgreens, and that's how they solicit donations. That's how they get the sponsorships for their events. They then tell young children, youth, that these companies are cool, and try to improve the image of those companies that partner with them. It seems that the Liberals bought that package with your tax dollar, with the tax dollar of every single Canadian. Justin Trudeau was given a massive platform to engage directly with young people at these events, and of course his immediate family making big bucks off the speaking fees. So we believe that there's certainly enough there to warrant an investigation from the RCMP, and we hope that they do so.
This concludes the press conference. Ceci met fin à la
Merci beaucoup.
conférence de presse. Merci.
Thanks very much.